Hello. Today I'd like to do a brief analysis and review of Dobsonian tabletop telescopes. In the 1970s, a fellow named John Dobson wanted to make a telescope, so he did. Dobsonian reflectors, 8, 10, 12-inch, good size apertures, but the mounts required to support the weight of these things put the mounts out of the reach of most people. So he came up with a new design for a mount for heavy telescopes, which are now called the Dobsonian mounts. He had two big round circles made of particle board, bolted together with a groove cut in the same location of each, and ball bearings put in there, sort of like a Lazy Susan. So it would rotate quick and easy on those ball bearings. And then he had two arms come up, kind of like a yoke mount, and the telescope would have a spindle on each side. The optical tube would have a spindle, and you'd be able to move it up and down on those spindles sitting in grooves on the arms. If you have any kind of carpenter skill, you can make one of these things for like 25 bucks instead of 2,300 and higher. They became kind of popular. It's one of the most popular type telescopes today. The Dobsonian Reflector, usually f6 to f8, sitting on a Dobsonian mountain. They're called Dobsonian telescopes. They also make a little tiny version like this one, about 2.5 pounds. They're called Tabletop Dobsonians. There are two varieties, the 3-inch, which are under 100, and the 4-inch, which run 125 to 150. The Zoomel is probably the best of the 4-inch, although the Orions are also good. They both have parabolic mirrors. None of the ones under 100 have parabolic mirrors. They all have spherical mirrors and 3-inch apertures. I have here a Carson, which is probably, in my humble opinion, the best of the 3-inchers. And that's primarily because of the focuser. You turn this knob and the focuser goes in and out. But the focusing tube does not move into the optical tube. In most cases, Dobsonian reflectors use a rack and pinion steering, or a rack and pinion mount. When it goes in here, the optical tube, it intrudes, the focusing tube will intrude into the optical tube. And when you only have 76 millimeters of optical tube available, that's taking up too much of the, blocking too much of the light. This is, as all of them, 300 millimeters, 76 millimeters in aperture. They use spherical mirrors. They're very light. You have to have something to set it on. This is currently sitting on a table inside my front room. Outside, I set it on a trash can. If you happen to have a tripod, you can take that out and set it on a tripod. You can't collimate the back. You buy it, and if it's not collimated, you best return it and get a replacement, because you can't collimate that. You can collimate the front. That is, align the front mirror with the back mirror. There's little screws there to do that with. As far as the views, they're kind of crummy. And that's because it only has a 300 millimeter focal length with a spherical mirror. You can improve that, however. One way is through aperture reduction. Take a piece of cardboard, trace this around, leave room for some flaps, cut it out, cut out a smaller than, like, say, a 60 or a 55 millimeter hole in the middle, then tape it on here. but when you only have 3 inches to start with, aperture reduction is not a good choice. A much better choice is one of these things, a Barlow. I tried ×2, ×3, ×4, and found that ×2 Barlow works best. It increases the focal length from 300 to 600 millimeters. That improves the view quite a bit. It's still kind of a crummy view though, because it uses these Huygens eyepieces. There's 2 of them, a 9mm and a 20mm. And Huygens eyepieces work best with f12 or better. You don't have f12. You have a lot less than f12. But if you put a Flossel eyepiece in and put that into the ×2 Barlow, you get a pretty good view. You get to, I've tried a number of different eyepieces and a number of different Barlows. 25mm or 10mm Flossel along with ×2 Barlow gives you by far the best view. In fact, it's kind of decent then. What can you see? Same thing you could see with most any 3-inch reflector. You can see, especially if you have a good Flossel and ×2 Barlow, you can see craters and stuff on the moon. You can see the rings of Saturn, because you'll be operating at about 100 magnification, which isn't bad. And assuming a 10mm, the 25 somewhat less. You can see cloud belts on Jupiter. You can see some of the bright nebula. M42, M45, M13, M17, M19, a fair number of them in fact, and they'll show up reasonably clear. Let's see, 600 divided by 76 is about an F. It comes out to about an F8.0 or an F8 something if you're using the ×2 Barlow. And they're not bad. Now, I don't. Other than taking this out last night to test it, I don't have a whole lot of use for this. I do astrophotography. But if you're 8 years old, you want something really, really easy to use, just kind of point and click. Oh, these things don't normally come. They don't come with a finder scope, but with a 300mm focal length, you don't really need a finder scope. You just point it and kind of point it in the general direction of what you want to see, and look through the eyepiece. And if you have a 20 or 25mm eyepiece, you'll see it, and then you just have to center it, because this has just about the same field of view as a good finder scope. So if you're very young and you want to learn about telescopes, or if you have a son or a daughter who's very young and they want to learn about telescopes, they're kind of tough. They're not real delicate, and they're easy to use. And they don't cost all that much. Just I think the Celestron First Scope, that's what they call theirs. I checked this morning, it was $71 on Amazon. This was $80 on Amazon. But just because it's got that special, really nice, neat focuser. And there's a lot of people on YouTube and online that seem to say, oh, why don't you get one of these as their first telescope? Well, a lot of people say you should always get a Dobsonian for your first telescope, and the bigger the better. Aperture is king. So my first telescope was a 10-inch Dobsonian. I drug it out in the yard once, drug it back in, was down on my back 3 days, gave it away the next day. I was out $1,000. This way, you only be out $80, or about $95 if you buy a ×2 Barlow, and another $20, I guess, if you get a good Flossel eyepiece. This is Celestron. Astromedia makes good ones too. It looks like a toy, works like a toy, but it gets pretty good views for a little small telescope. I say get one for your kid if he's interested or seems interested in astronomy, or if you want to review it, buy one for yourself. Yeah, and that's all I have to say about these little things. So until I see you again, happy trails.